Hello and welcome to Psych Boost. In this video, we're going to be covering what it means to say schizophrenia has a biological cause. As part of that discussion, we're going to touch on genetics, neural structure, and the activity of neurotransmitters, in particular the role of dopamine. And of course, we're going to cover the strengths of the biological explanation argument with evaluations. So let's begin. PsychBoost.com, over 170 videos to help you with your qualification, and Patreon supporters can access bonus resources, tutorial videos, and the Discord channel. The genetic explanation. To say that schizophrenia is biological, we're suggesting it comes about through physical processes. Now, one of the main drivers of physical processes in the body is how genetic information is expressed. But let me make clear right away that while there is evidence for schizophrenia to have a genetic basis, there is not one schizophrenia gene. Instead, it seems that schizophrenia is polygenetic. This means that there are a large number of individual genes that increase the risk of developing schizophrenia. In fact, research looking directly at the genetic code of over 36,000 schizophrenia sufferers by Ripke has identified 108 gene loci that are implicated. A number of these genes are associated with the nervous system, and interestingly with the immune system. But the genetic cause is complex, with different combinations of genes causing schizophrenia in different people. We can call that etiologically heterogeneous. Now, beyond genetic analysis, there is another way to investigate if schizophrenia is genetic, and that's family studies. If schizophrenia has a genetic basis, we would expect to see schizophrenia in close relatives of schizophrenia sufferers. Now, we can measure this statistical relationship with a concordance rate. When we use a concordance rate in schizophrenia research, we mean how often we see schizophrenia in both people. So, for example, we could expect the concordance rate to be higher in siblings than in cousins, because siblings share more DNA. Of particular interest are twins. Identical twins have identical DNA, so we'd expect to see twin studies showing a high concordance rate in monozygotic twins than dizygotic twins. So let's consider some evidence. Research by Gottsman, this was a review of a large number of cases looking for schizophrenia in family members, and what was found was a concordance rate of 48% in identical twins, dropping to 17% for non-identical twins. Now, considering the concordance rate in the general population is 1%, this does seem to be strong evidence that there is a genetic aspect to schizophrenia. The higher the genetic similarity, the more likely someone is to share the condition. But you might have spotted some issues with this data. Characteristics that are fully genetic should have a 100% concordance rate in identical twins. Think of blue eyes, for example. But that's not what we see with the 48% rate in genetically identical twins. But we do expect both types of twins to share a family environment, often sharing the same educational experiences, family events, and even diets. So the differences between the different types of twins is likely due to genetics. Now, this data suggests a genetic aspect of schizophrenia, but also a complex relationship between genes and the environment. Adoption studies also provide evidence for a genetic basis of schizophrenia. Tenari showed that when adopted and raised in a psychologically healthy environment, 5.8% of children of schizophrenic mothers developed schizophrenia, compared to 2% of children who did not have biologically schizophrenic mothers. Now, this suggests that there is a biological risk. However, as 36.8% of those children whose mothers had schizophrenia went on to develop schizophrenia if they were raised in a dysfunctional family, again, this suggests that, while important, any biological causes are influenced by psychological factors. Neural correlates. Genetics code for the biological processes within the body. Biological processes that are in the nervous system and are correlated with schizophrenia, we would call neural correlates. And the main neural correlate we're going to talk about here is a dopamine hypothesis. This suggests that too much or an imbalance of the neurotransmitter dopamine is responsible for symptoms. Now, the exact mechanism isn't known, but too much dopamine, known as hyperdopaminergia, in the brain's speech centers like Broca's area, may be responsible for auditory hallucinations. And negative symptoms like avolition and speech poverty could be due to low dopamine levels known as hypodopaminergia in the frontal cortex. Now, this theory first came about from observations that dopamine-releasing drugs such as L-Dopa would produce schizophrenia-like symptoms in healthy people, and that antipsychotics that work by reducing levels of dopamine decrease symptoms. Now, while dopamine is the main neurotransmitter implicated in schizophrenia, there are others that may play a role. Glutamate is in lower levels in people with schizophrenia, and it regulates learning, attention, and memory. Serotonin, as clozapine is an effective treatment for schizophrenia and it acts on a range of neurotransmitter systems, including the serotonin system, that might be involved as well. Now, when looking for evidence for the dopamine hypothesis, we can look at the success of antipsychotic drugs that work by influencing the dopamine system as evidence for the dopamine hypothesis. For example, the Schets meta-analysis of 212 studies. As these drugs work in the dopamine system and are more effective than placebo at treating symptoms, then this supports the argument that dopamine is responsible for the symptoms. Otherwise, the drugs wouldn't be effective. But a quick point, if you're asked to write a question about the biological explanation for schizophrenia, don't allow yourself to start writing a full essay about drug treatments. All we're doing here is using the effectiveness of the drugs to support the dopamine hypothesis. Keep your essay focused. And moving on to another neural correlate, we can mention ventricles. These are large voids in the brain, and these voids are filled with cerebrospinal fluid. Research by Johnston in the 1970s showed using CT scans that these structures are larger on average in people with schizophrenia. Now, enlarged ventricles is an interesting observation, but a problem with this research is it's correlational. We don't know if larger ventricles cause schizophrenia or the other way around, or maybe enlarged ventricles are a side effect of medication. I'm going to finish this exploration of the biological basis of schizophrenia by considering both determinism and reductionism as evaluations. Now, I would advise not to use both of these evaluations together in an essay, mainly because many students get them confused with each other, and there are always other evaluations available to us. But I'm going to use them both now so I can show you clearly the difference between the concepts, and you may want to pick one to use in your essay. So starting with determinism. Using a biological explanation for schizophrenia, such as the genetic explanation, assumes that schizophrenia is inevitable. You have the genes, or you don't. Schizophrenia is biologically determined for you. And as you can imagine, that can be disempowering and could make you feel like you're unable to change your situation. The alternate cognitive explanation is soft determinist. There may be a causal reason for the origin of schizophrenia. However, the individual can alter their own thought processes via free will and ultimately control the disorder. Looking now at reductionism. Being able to explain the origin of schizophrenia as a basic cellular and chemical process is biologically reductionist. This has benefits. For example, the biological explanation has parsimony. It explains the disorder simply using the available evidence. This allows future research on schizophrenia's origins and treatments to be focused. However, this reductionist approach ignores a range of valid evidence for psychological causes of schizophrenia. We can add on to this reductionist argument its opposite, holism. A better explanation for schizophrenia may be a holistic approach. The diaphysis stress approach accepts that the cause of schizophrenia is genetic, acting as a weakness or diaphysis, but it includes psychological environmental stresses like family dysfunction as a trigger. Have a look again at the Gottsman and Tonari research studies in this video and see if you can make a little more sense of their results now. And here's a real exam question that you might want to attempt after covering all that information. And if you're a patron at the neuron level and above, you can access a tutorial on PsychBoost in which I'll talk you through a model answer for this question and general tips. For everyone, please don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the videos released right up to your exams. And I'll see you in the next PsychBoost video.